Hi, and welcome to Classic Guitar Rock. We have an update for today, February 15th, 2023. On this day, way back in 1964, the Beatles scored their first number one album in the US. This, of course, was the beginning of Beatlemania. February 25th, I think, is when they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time. I could be wrong on that, but this was the beginning of Beatlemania, 1964. And on this date, their album Meet the Beatles was the number one album in the US. And of course, the Beatles, tremendously influential to a lot of bands. Can't overstate that. I'm Jeremy. Thanks for joining me. We're going to check out some emails, and then we've got some news items here. Please email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts, any of your thoughts, right? But specifically, I'd love to hear your memories of your favorite classic guitar rock songs or albums, because I'd love to share those. I've got one email about that today that we'll talk about. But let's jump in to the emails, and then we've got some news items today. First, whoops. This is from Bobby79631. Thank you for providing the best lesson I've seen on Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl. Well, thank you. It's funny because I watched a half dozen other lessons, and they are all different, and none of them sounded 100% right, except for the muffled power chords. He means that muted part at the beginning. For such a simple song, I find it rather stunning that so many interpretations are off. Full disclosure, not all my lessons are that good. But apparently, Bobby liked that lesson. You can check out the lesson on Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl. And he's right about that song. If you look at various lessons, they're all over the board. Everyone gets the intro, do-do-do-do-do-do. Everyone gets that part right. And then from there, it just kind of goes all over the place. I thought mine was pretty accurate, actually. You can check it out and see what you think. Let me talk about Rick Springfield for a minute. Rick Springfield, well, specifically the Working Class Dog album that came out in 81. Rick Springfield is considered kind of this teeny bopper heartthrob. He was on a soap opera at the time that album came out. And he is, right? He's a teeny bopper guy. But that album, Working Class Dog, is a fantastic album. Neil Giraldo, Pat Benatar's guitar player and husband, he's the guitar player, right? The band's super tight. Jesse's Girl, the guitars. I mean, it's iconic 80s rock. And I've said this before. I say it in the lesson video on that song. Neil Giraldo, one of the best guitar players from the 80s. Just excellent, super talented, super tasty. Side one of Working Class Dog, for my money, perhaps one of the best power pop sides ever. Remember, albums used to be in sides? Guys, you listen to one side, then can't really talk about sides anymore. But I can't say enough about Neil Giraldo. The stuff he did with Rick Springfield's awesome. And he's only on that one album. And then after that, the Rick Springfield stuff's not that good. But Working Class Dog is a great power pop rock album. I read somewhere that Robin Ford plays on it too. In Wikipedia, I think it said that, but I've never really found out what exactly he might play on that. But could you imagine an album with Neil Giraldo and Robin Ford playing on it? You know it's going to be good. Well, check it out. Another email. Jeremy, I listen to the podcast regularly. I noticed you started with Jeff, and then he was replaced by John. What happened to Jeff? That's from Bill. Bill, that's a great question. A little history on the podcast. If you guys remember, if you've followed us on YouTube, I posted a video on YouTube looking for a co-host for the podcast. I want to start a podcast. I want a co-host. If you're interested, let me know. And I heard from probably about 10 people. And Jeff seemed like an awesome fit. He's a working musician. He's from Colorado. We're about the same age. And just a great guy. And so Jeff started out, I think we did about the first, 15 episodes maybe with Jeff. I can't remember. Jeff's awesome. We did not have a falling out. There was nothing like that at all. Jeff was going through a lot of personal things in his life, moving, a lot of stuff going on with his work. And so it was kind of becoming tough for him to do it. At the same time, I had been wanting to do, and this hasn't really happened yet. I've been talking about it forever, but at the same time, trying to do more video stuff with the podcast and kind of grow it and make it a little more professional and that sort of thing. Well, my good friend John, who he and I have played in a band together for quite a while, he's got a background in video and audio production. And even though he's not as steeped in the classic rock as I am, or even as Jeff was, he just brings a lot to the table. And with Jeff, things going on with Jeff, it just kind of made sense to kind of have John come in, and Jeff wouldn't feel pressured to come in and do this because he was just doing it for fun, right? Like we all are. And so, Jeff, super busy, and I think he was appreciative of the fact that he could kind of step out. Jeff was crucial for the first few episodes, and he really helped us get started. And then when John came in, and even John and I, to be honest, it's tough for us to hook up with both of our work schedules and all the stuff going on. And that's one of the things that we're trying to work on. Podcasts are funny. I think everyone that gets into doing a podcast, first of all, it takes a certain type of personality and it kind of an expressive type of personality that is okay with kind of putting themselves out there. And it's a certain type of person that listens to podcasts. Not everyone likes podcasts. It's just not so you're already dealing with kind of limited populations, right? But they can take up a lot of time. And to do them right, I admire these very professional podcasts because, guys, just to do this little podcast takes way more time than you'd think. You got to record it. Sometimes got to do a little research. You got to edit it. So yeah, it's a lot of work. And John and I are going to try and get back at it again hard and fast in 2023. I've kind of been doing the past few episodes on my own, but we're going to rectify that and we'll get back in the studio and be recording some things. But yeah, Jeff was a great guy. Jeff is a great guy. It just kind of seemed to work better if he kind of stepped out and John stepped in. But he was super important in the start of the podcast. I love to go back and hear those episodes with Jeff because he's just a great guy, great guitar player too. Here's another one. Classic Guitar Rock. I totally agree with your semi-rant. It's got like a smiley face today about Pink Floyd and Journey fighting in public. That was just from yesterday that we talked about that. That's another one of the negatives of social media. In the past, all of this infighting would have been unseen by the fans. Most of us probably wish we were rich rock musicians who had to deal with annoying band members and discuss it in public. LOL. He's exactly right. That is from Geezer John. Thanks, Geezer. He's exactly right. These pampered rock stars who make millions of dollars, you'd think they would have something better to do than go online and trash talk each other. It's very immature and silly. Don't get me started again. Okay, a few more here. Actually, just one more email, it looks like, if I'm reading it right. Yeah, then some news items. Hi, Classic Guitar Rock. I'm responding to your invitation on Twitter to share a memory of our favorite classic rock song or album. And I did do that. I think I posted on YouTube yesterday also. Yeah, I would love to hear your favorite memories of a song. What I'm trying to do is put together, share some of these things. I'm trying to build kind of more of a community, right? Where people can come on and share things. So it's not just what I think, it's what you think. We want to hear your thoughts on that. I got lost. Let me start all over. I'm responding to your invitation on Twitter to share a memory of our favorite classic rock song or album. One of my fondest memories is the Boston Don't Look Back album. I was in 7th grade living in Missouri, and my best friend John Black had that album. It was like our soundtrack for the whole year of 1979. Of course, we played it on the record player at his house and my house, but we also made terrible cassette recordings of it so we could play it in our crappy tape recorders. This was pre-Sony Walkman, by the way. To this day, when I hear a Boston song on the radio, I'm transported back to 1979 and all the great times I had with my friend John. Thanks for the memory, Aaron. Aaron, I could have written this, right? This is so not necessarily about that album, but that time frame. We're the same age. It sounds like 79, 80, totally. You could go to Kmart and buy like 3 cassettes for like $1, and they were crap cassettes. Here's how low budget I was, right? I had the crappy little, GE tape recorder, whatever. I would literally slide that up next to the speaker, play a record and record it that way. And of course it sounded like crap. And then later I realized, when I got better stereos, you could record it in line. You could record an album and it would actually sound pretty good, especially if you used a good tape. But man, when I was 12 years old, I didn't care. I just got a cheap, crappy tape, my crappy little tape recorder. I'd record it. And, you'd get all the room noise and your sisters talking in the background, whatever. But that's what you'd listen to. And I'm sure a lot of us can identify with that are in this Gen X age, for sure. That is awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Aaron. Again, email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. I'd love to hear your memories of your favorite songs and artists and albums. Okay, a few news things that I just wanted to talk about. You've probably seen some of these items if you follow music news. Last week, Motley Crue had their first date with John 5 playing. John 5, of course, replaced Mick Mars, who cannot tour anymore. Mick's been in bad health for a long time. John 5 sounds awesome. I don't think anyone had any concerns about him being able to do the job, right? The concerns are still about Vince. Vince still sounds terrible. And, I'm not trying to be mean-spirited, right? But at some point, I'm going to play two sides of the issue here, because what I want to say is at some point you just gotta step away and you gotta stop when you can't do it anymore. Vince has passed that point and did probably about 5 years ago. He was never the best singer, right? But he can't do it. It's laughable, and there are so many videos on YouTube or Facebook. The funniest ones are where they show the captions at the bottom of what it sounds like he's saying, right? And they're hilarious, right? But it's embarrassing. So part of me says, hey, just have some dignity and stop. The other part of me says, if people are still willing to buy tickets to see you, well, then who am I to tell you to stop? And by the way, we could replace Motley Crue with Kiss or with any number of aging bands that maybe should not be doing it anymore, right? But John 5 sounded great. Okay, he's awesome. He's playing the song. The music sounds better than it has been, as good as it's ever sounded, right? Vince, not so much. Also, I'm a big Graham Bonnet fan. I interviewed Graham on the channel. You can find that if you're a Graham Bonnet fan. Graham Bonnet, of course, was in Rainbow, was in Alcatraz. He's like 75 now and still can deliver, still does a pretty good job live. He is working on an album with Jeff Loomis. Jeff Loomis contributed to the last Alcatraz album, or was it last Graham Bonnet Band album. And he's a great guitar player, great writer. So I'm excited that they're working on an album. Graham, super nice guy, great interview. And I'm a big fan. He's one of my favorite vocalists, so I'm looking forward to that. And we'll keep you updated when that comes out. Another thing, Yes is one of those bands. Guys, this is becoming the norm and not the exception anymore for the classic rock era bands. And it makes sense, right? People get old, members pass away. And so the lineups change. They have to, if these bands want to continue to tour. Some people are hardcore and they say, if it's not all the original members, it's crap and it's a ripoff, it's a fraud. Well, I don't believe that. But there is a line, right? How many original members need to be involved for it to actually be the band? That's a good question. Why am I bringing this up? Yes announced that Jay Schellen has become a permanent member of the band following the death of veteran drummer Alan White last May. So Alan White was a great drummer. He died in May. And Jay Schellen actually had been subbing for Alan and has been working in various on and off again since about like 2016. So he's very familiar with the band, very familiar with the material. Totally makes sense. Alan White had even said, hey, when I need to be replaced, this is the guy, right? So here's a quote. Jay will fulfill Alan's wishes in becoming the new drummer with Yes, the band said in a statement. He had previously played alongside Yes keyboardist Jeff Downs and late bassist Chris Squire, together with long working relationships with Alan and Yes bass guitarist Billy Sherwood. This gave Jay a deep insight into the workings of the dynamic rhythm section that drives Yes music. Okay, so, but Yes is another one of these bands that Steve Howe is now back. There were times when Steve Howe wasn't in Yes, he was back in Asia. Asia and Yes have kind of been trading people back and forth for a while. Jeff Downs, I don't know. Is Jeff Downs in Yes now? I'm not sure. Anderson, Rabin, and what's his name? Keyboard player have been touring as ARW, playing Yes music. And John Anderson, I've mentioned Band Geeks. John Anderson is actually doing a tour backed by Band Geeks. How cool is that? So there's some rancor within the ranks of Yes fans. Is the Yes band really Yes if it doesn't have John Anderson? Okay. And then this ARW, has Rabin by the hardcore Yes fans. He's not really Yes, even though he was responsible for resuscitating the band and bringing them back to life in the early 80s. The good news is if you like Yes music, you could go see a few different tours, right? If you're a purist, you're going to be upset because neither is legit for various reasons. But Yes is one of these bands that has continued to soldier on. This is going to sound snarky. Steve Howe looks like he's 148 years old, right? But he still can play. So good for him. Again, if people are still buying tickets, who am I to say they shouldn't be touring? Okay. Another news item here. Another drummer, more drummers in the news. if I can find it. This is from Ultimate Classic Rock News. When U2 appears in Las Vegas later this year for a fall residency, it will be the first time the band has performed live since December 2019. But that's not the only reason the shows will be noteworthy. It's also reportedly only the second time in the band's 40-plus year career that they'll perform shows without one of their core members, drummer Larry Mullen Jr. Mullen Jr. had previously announced he would not be joining the band on the road in 2023 while he handles health issues. So his replacement is Bram Vandenberg, a 40-year-old drummer of the Dutch pop rock band Krezip. So they will be touring without Larry Mullen. I'm sure Larry Mullen's a great guy. And as much as I love U2, it would be pretty easy to have just about anyone fill in for Larry Mullen. Or what's his name? Bass player. I'm not just saying, Adam Clayton. I don't mean to be rude, but and you don't have to have complicated, crazy stuff to have good music. I think U2's awesome. I think some of their songs are simply beautiful, atmospheric, grand soundscapes. I love much of what they do, but the drum parts and the bass parts are pretty easy to play. So we wish Larry Mullen well. I don't know how much he's involved in the writing process and that sort of thing, but it's not like you're having to find someone to play Neil Peart drum parts. Let's just say that. Okay. One other item. Bon Jovi. Do we care about Bon Jovi? Do we? Do you care about Bon Jovi? Bon Jovi's rumored reunion with classic-era guitarist Richie Sambora appears to be inching closer to fruition. Sambora, who played with the big-haired Hitmakers from 1983 to 2013 and co-wrote many of their greatest hits, discussed the prospect of rejoining his former bandmates in a recent interview. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it's looking like he will be getting back together. And Richie Sambora is a better singer than John Bon Jovi, in my opinion. And I don't know that people realize how much he contributed vocally to the band. A lot to do with their songwriting, obviously. It's like Jeff Pilson in Dokken. You ever hear Jeff Pilson sing? He's a better singer than Don Dokken. It's just interesting how, especially now. I mean, back in the day, Don Dokken was a good singer, but now he's one of those that is in the Vince Neil program. It's just funny how a lot of times these guys that never are out front singing, when you hear them sing, you're like, whoa, why isn't that guy singing all the time? Jeff Pilson is that way, by the way. Speaking of Jeff Pilson, and speaking about bands touring with or without original members, Foreigner, and I love Foreigner, love Lou Gramm, love Foreigner. I even love Foreigner with Kelly Hansen. Kelly Hansen is a great singer, great entertainer. But now, from what I hear, Mick hardly appears with Foreigner. So basically what we've got is we've got a touring Foreigner with no original members. Are we okay with that? Calling themselves Foreigner? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'm just wondering. And the band's awesome. I mean, I've seen stuff on YouTube of them and they're wonderful. Don't get me wrong. Wonderful band. But should they be touring as Foreigner when Mick is not going to be there? He might be there. I think he'll come out and play a song or two and then he leaves, and then sometimes he's not there at all. So, and guess what? my wife has already bought me tickets to see Foreigner in Spokane in the fall when they come. So I'm going to see them. I guess I'm okay with it, right? But there will be no original members. Now, I'm paying $38 to see them. Now, what if it were the Eagles? Love the Eagles. Guess who the original member in the Eagles is? There's one. Don Henley. Okay. Now you get Joe Walsh, you get Timothy B. Schmidt, who I think are paid as, side musicians. I'm sure Don Henley's the one raking in all the money. You got Vince Gill, who's astronomical. He's wonderful. I love Vince Gill. But again, one dude, an original member. Granted, Walsh and Schmidt have been in there. They're considered legit Eagles. They've been in there, Walsh since Hotel California, Timothy B. Schmidt since The Long Run. So I guess they're kind of legit. But again, you go see the Eagles, there's probably 12 musicians on stage. One original member. Is that okay for them to call themselves the Eagles? And I guess I'm more concerned about the Eagles because you're going to pay a few $100 to see the Eagles versus $38 to see Foreigner, right? I don't know. What do you think? Is that all the news I have? Yeah, that's all the news I have for today. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Please like the video, subscribe here, and shoot me an email, classicguitarrock@mail.com. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.